This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
It's 11:07 at WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast, and it's time to ask a doctor, Rabbi.
Thank you. This is Rabbi Shafir Lobb of Congregation 8 Chaim in Port St. Lucie, and thank you for the doctor. Appreciate that as well. So welcome to this beautiful, cool Florida Friday morning. And please do give me a call if there's anything that you would like to ask a rabbi. Give me a call at 772-340-1590, entertaining any and all questions. So, what's the hot topic today, folks? What would you like to hear about? I'm waiting for one of you to give me a call. And until you do give me a call, I'm going to take up a subject that I heard on our Ask a Lawyer, because I always listen to the show before me. And so I'm going to take up a couple of things about child abuse. And
oh, boy. Yeah.
Yeah, physical aggression against children. And, you know, there are times when a parent does lose it. I will tell you, I was raised without spanking. There was exactly one time in my life when I was spanked. I was about, maybe 8 or 9 years old. It was a Sunday night, and you kind of have to understand our house. This is, I roamed with the dinosaurs. I'm an old thing. And so Sunday night TV was really big to me. Late night TV was always when the good shows were on. And my bedroom was positioned such that if I scrunched up out of my bed onto the wall, I could kind of see the TV in the living room.
Was this Carol Burnett or something?
No,
like
it was
that?
Gunsmoke, I think.
Gunsmoke.
I think it was Gunsmoke.
Okay.
Yeah, which I really liked. It's either, something like that. And I don't remember exactly what it was, but I was supposed to be in bed sleeping, and I was clearly more engaged in the TV in the next room. And it was my parents' habit in those days to sit on the couch, watch the TV, and during commercials, one of them would get up, get something to eat, and bring it back for the two of them, and, cast a glance in my way in the bedroom. So I always knew when it went to the commercial break, I would scrunch down real quickly, pretend to be asleep, and as soon as I heard the show come back on,
I love it,
I would scrunch back up. And this one time, for whatever reason, my father got up off the couch to get something and glanced in, and there I was scrunched up on the wall. Not a good plan. And of course, the genius of young children, I then went and ran into the bathroom and locked the door. Because, children really have this really good logic function going on in their heads.
Oh, my.
And so my parents did what most parents would do in that situation. They got an awl and pushed open the bathroom door. And as I heard the tumblers click, I yanked the door in, got my father off balance, ran to the other bathroom in the house, and locked myself in again. Yeah, demonstrating the real genius of how to escalate things when you shouldn't.
And then he called SWAT to knock down
he
the
didn't.
door.
He still was not over. He did the all thing again, and I managed to get him off balance and escape my mother, who was trying to catch me the second time, and locked myself in the first bathroom yet again. That time when they opened the lock, they were waiting for me. And yes, I did get spanked that one time. And I would say that, I understand they're having lost their temper, which we later had a discussion about, that they had lost their temper with me, because I was not thinking logically. I was not even behaving at my age.
See, now you need to call Stewart and have them sue the estate of William Arness at Gunsmoke that it was their fault
yeah.
that you got spanked.
There you go. No, I don't think so. But that's the one time that, and was I a perfect child? Far from it. I was not an angel. I did all the things that kids normally do, up to and including barking in class one day and walking on desks. Of course, I'm not sure that my parents knew about those two events, because I'm not sure the teachers reported them for fear of being out of control of their own classrooms. But that's a whole nother dynamic.
Well, the 7-foot nuns that I had with huge paddles, they got our attention and hurt.
Yeah, and is that really helping the Catholic Church now?
Well, now,
right?
now that I look back on it,
Yeah,
right? There's problems.
There's a challenge if a parent resorts to violence, particularly easily and quickly, then you are teaching some really bad skills, life skills, to your child, which is that anytime I'm angry, it's okay to aggress. Because spanking and hitting, paddling, Board of Education, all of that's aggression. It really is. It's physical aggression.
Mm-hmm. And
what you're saying, which is true with wars, and I say this as somebody who's served, I have an honorable discharge as a captain. So I'm somebody who did serve and believe in being a strong military, and I believe in détente, and I believe that I have a responsibility to give back to my country, which is why I served, because women didn't have to serve, and today we still have an all-volunteer. Now we have an all-volunteer. My husband served because he drew the short stick on the lottery. He's a little bit older than me. He's a Vietnam vet. So, we take that kind of commitment very seriously in my family. I always have. My brother is retired Navy. So it's not like we shy from the military or from things like that. We understand the importance of having a strong détente, a strong force. So, but what does it do with children? It teaches them a couple of things. It teaches them that it's okay to hit people you love, which is a really serious issue. I love you so I can hurt you. And yes, I understand the kid acting out in Walmart. Grab the kid, put him in a restraining hold until they hold still, till they behave. Hopefully you're doing the discipline before they're bigger and taller than you are.
Unfortunately, that's where you see a lot of very strange things now.
Where Walmart?
In the Walmarts. Yeah.
The people of Walmart. I understand, and I'll come to Walmart's defense, right? A lot of people will say don't shop at Walmart, but I also will say that Walmart will employ people that a lot of other companies won't.
When we were shopping for the Christmas kids one time, there was a lady that just was really paddling her child. And you are right. An assistant manager came right up and tossed her out.
Yeah. It doesn't belong. It doesn't belong, especially not where it's going to not only physically hurt the child, but it's also going to embarrass them.
Right.
The restraining hold is going to embarrass them enough. And what that's saying to the child is I care enough about your behavior that I'm willing to draw attention to us. But a restraining hold does wonders. I mean, I have held kids in restraining holds in school when they act out, because it allows them to re-engage the brain, right? If my parents had been able to grab me and restrain me, then the locking of the bathrooms wouldn't have happened. But one time in, however many years they exerted parental discipline, one time losing their temper, I can look back and say, that's not real bad. People do lose their temper, and they lose control once in a while, but it's not okay. We all make mistakes, and my parents both apologized to me afterward, and I actually said to them, I understand you being that angry at me. I don't know what I was thinking. I was old enough to have that much cognition. And because, I look at it now and it's like, where was your brain? Clearly it had exited stage left. It left me on adrenaline. Because I was not making intelligent decisions. I was escalating what was already I was in the wrong, and that's why I was escalating.
What has been a very interesting experience for me is some of the stories you hear from some of our basketball players who've gone through IRSA, and some of the just god-awful family situations that they have survived. It's like, Oh my God, this is a horror movie. Yeah.
Some kids do grow up, and I understand that some kids grow up okay, but they have to work at it.
Yeah.
If they come out of that environment. The deck's already stacked against them. And the more physical aggression a parent shows, the more that's the case. Even timeouts that send you to your room and not allow you to have contact with me are in some ways a problem, because the time when they really need to be with you is when they need to work through what they did, and you need to work through your anger. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on. Good parenting is being in command of the situation with a child whose logic is not well formed. That's exactly the definition. So it's all those times that the kid makes a poor choice, and the parent, one of the other things that Stuart did say, parents teach their children by modeling behavior. Right? So the children of parents who aggress are much more likely to be aggressive, much more likely to seek a physically violent response to a stimulus than somebody who was not raised that way. Timeouts can be, go sit down, don't play with your toys. You sit there where you and I can talk, and when you calm down enough, we'll talk. Or when I calm down enough, we'll talk. I also understand, if the kid's going to run across the street, reach out, grab them, yank them back.
Well, yeah,
right?
Certainly, yeah.
Save a life. But is that aggression? That's different,
no.
right? It's still going to startle and perhaps injure the child because of the force of grabbing. But, then you can have the discussion. Obviously, in the street is not the place. And, kids misbehaving. I can remember my nephew once at a Friday night service. He was about 2 years old, 3 years old, something like that. And my mother was sitting with him, and he was acting out as kids that age will at a Friday night service. And she's, of course, highly embarrassed because she is the rabbi's wife. And here is her grandchild just totally being obnoxious. And, I'm sitting next to her, and I'm an older teenager at this point. And she looks at him and she says, "Are you going to behave?" And he goes, "No." and I, of course, am now laughing because I think this is hysterically funny. She's not pleased with me. But she, what she ended up doing was grabbing kid and walking out of the service until he calmed down. And they went and sat in a chair until he settled down. And, he didn't get a potch. He didn't get paddled. He didn't get any of those things. And yes, she was out of the service for, 3 or 4 minutes until he ran out of steam. And eventually he did. Mm-hmm. And if it had taken the whole service, it would have taken the whole service. He was being disruptive. He was enjoying having everybody look at him because it was fun. They didn't usually visit with us. They didn't live near us, so it was a visit. His older sister, was sitting quietly, so there was not the problem with her. She kind of chuckled at Grandma having to carry the kid out too. So, those are things that you do. You confine children. You don't allow them to be disruptive or a negative. Right? You don't reward them for those the misbehaving, attention-seeking moments.
Well, and you expect parents to be parents, I guess, if you will. I remember we had just a horrible situation. We were on the road with IRSA, and one of the parents was there, and his son didn't score enough points in his mind. And he came out to the bus and started slapping him around. And basically, the coach at the time had to tell the family, "You're never coming to a game again, and if you do, we're calling the police." How bad is that?
Yeah, first of all, having some idea that your kid is required to score.
That's so absurd.
That's absurd. You ask your child to do their best job that they can in the moment, and if they don't do well in your eyes, hug them and say, what can we do to help you do better?
And as it turned out, the kid wound up going to a good 4-year school and did well. Yeah,
well,
thank
good.
goodness.
Yeah, thank goodness for that.
Yeah.
I certainly imbibe the expectations of my parents. You started the session out with the doctor, and there's a standard Jewish joke that, when is the fetus viable? When it graduates from school. from med school. Right. Yeah.
Or law school.
Or law school,
oh,
right.
Sure, yeah.
You know, so that the PhD is an expectation.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, my father was a doctorate. And so he had a doctorate of Hebrew letters. My PhDs are in education and in psychology. And so, you know, it's those opinions that I'm expressing. It's seeing how and what kids learn from what. They're not a blank slate. They do come pre-wired with certain tendencies, but there certainly is a nurture effect. And let me take a moment here. One of the things that my parents taught me was always to say thank you. So let me say thank you to Sally Lloyd, who graciously sponsored this episode of Ask a Rabbi. And if you'd like to help me be here to speak to you and answer your questions, which you can call me at 772-340-1590. If you'd like to see more of this or even just help me out in any way or help the congregation, please do contact me or the congregation or the radio station. We are looking for sponsors, and you will get a mention or three on the air. So again, thank you, Sally, for sponsoring this episode of Ask a Rabbi. Very important. If what I'm doing is worth your listening, then please send a few shekels, as they say. Help us continue this effort, because it does cost money to bring it out on the airwaves. Mm-hmm. And so,
and if folks want to go and see the rabbi in person, stop by the temple.
Absolutely.
You bet.
Any Friday night at 7:30.
You bet.
We have services, including tonight, and Shabbat morning, Saturday morning at 10:30 we have services. And do have a special event coming up February 2nd. That's the first Sunday in February at 3 o'clock. We are having a 4 chaplains commemorative ceremony. There were 4 chaplains aboard the USS Dorchester who did a fairly heroic thing. There were 900 and some men on the Dorchester when it was sunk, and 200 and some managed to get on lifeboats and survive. Some perished in the sea because it was very cold. But the 4 chaplains that were on there was a Jew, I believe a Catholic, a Methodist, and a Reformed pastor. There were 4 chaplains on that ship. That was a big effort to get faith chaplains to go over to the war effort. But the 4 chaplains actually gave away their own life vests. They gave away their own gloves and their own protective gear to sailors and Marines who were on the ship, and saved multiple lives by doing that. They directed people to the boats. They handed out life vests. They stayed on the ship, and as the ship went down, it is said that people saw the 4 chaplains holding hands and singing out prayers and hymns.
Wow.
So
I've never heard that story before.
Anybody can look it up. 4 chaplains is all you need to Google.
Wow.
Or the Dorchester. And we actually had one of the survivors who lived up in either Fort Pierce or Sebastian, out that way, a little bit north of where we are now, and in Vero rather, or Sebastian.
Right.
That direction. And he just passed recently. So there was also a very heroic man on the ship that came to pick up the survivors, who jumped into the water to try to help save some of the people. He saved many, many people, but he himself contracted pneumonia from his exposure in the water, and he passed from that. He died and he just jumped in to help people. He wasn't even actually involved, but he was in the responders. So it's one of the things to note that very often responders pay dearly for their efforts to save and help others.
My favorite ESPN photographer, Jeff Israel, posted something on Facebook, which I shared. It is a picture of the Holocaust and 5 ladies in front and being led off. And underneath that, you see Israeli Air Force pilots, and these are the granddaughters of Holocaust survivors. And I'm thinking, wow, the picture was both horrific and incredible to see those ladies who are current pilots in the Israeli Air Force. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it is. Thankfully, there are survivors from the Holocaust, from the Shoah.
Yes, actually, Jeff's mom lives just south of us. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and I'm a second generation as well. So yeah. So I'm very, very glad for people who are able and willing to do what it took to survive, because that's not easy. It was not easy to survive those years in Europe if you were a European Jew. And Hitler got better and better, he and his mechanisms. And so, yeah, absolutely, surviving horror is important. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why my mother was so vehemently against spanking. I'll bring it back around.
Well, yeah.
She was the one. My father would have been willing, and she would not. She said, "We do not aggress against children." And so that is how I was raised. I was raised to, what's the solution to this problem? And it's not punch your way out of the bag. And it's,
that generation saw so much pain.
Yeah.
It's totally unimaginable what they went through.
And yet I do know people who came out of that, again, with the opposite reaction, and they're very physical and very violent. Right? Some PTSD goes that way.
Well, yeah.
Right? It goes both ways. So, and I don't have good answers other than to say that violence begets violence. And there's enough evidence to support that claim that if you're teaching somebody to use that as a response, they're going to look at that as one of the tools in their box. And perhaps the first one they grab, if it's the first one you usually grab.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, how do we create a less violent society? By being less violent. Right? Every one of us needs to pull back at least one time. Yeah, do it a little bit more than you're doing it right now.
What is amazing, in looking at, let's say, current events, if you will, is what's going on in Brooklyn right now. Between the blacks and the Jewish population there, they've got some major problems up there.
There are major problems. I wish that othering wasn't an issue. We often look at victims of racism, of sexism, of anti-Semitism, of Islamophobia, any of those isms, as if they are not going to have it. Wrong. They're still going to have it just as much as the rest of the population. So, yes, blacks who've been oppressed, blacks who've been abused, they're going to turn around and show that to others as well. Because we are not good at teaching our children that people are all God's children. That all of us have something really unique to bring to the table. And, so let's go ahead and take a look at things like Suleiman. I guess I'm going to go ahead and touch that. I wasn't going to. That was my decision. But what I'll say about that is that I don't have enough information to really pass judgment on it, which is why I wasn't originally going to bring it up. I would hope that the forces that brought that up the stream had a way of doing it. I wonder why there wasn't plausible deniability along the way, and all of that was other things that are normally part of that kind of operation. So there's at least 15 layers to the story that I don't have enough information to really say much about. So I'll make that my statement. I don't know enough, and I'm smart enough to say I don't know enough. I'm a little bit concerned that some people say this is something they've been trying to do for a long period of time. There's enough flags to be concerned. Right now, yes, the action is wait and see. Watch where it goes. Be cautious. Be alert. Don't be stupid. Let's be careful about not doing something stupid like locking yourself in a bathroom.
Yeah. And the military was saying that they've been tracking this guy for 6 months.
Well, and I've also read where it's been a much longer time, etc. I don't know the backstory. It's interesting that they knew exactly where and when and what, but there's so many questions. There's far more questions than somebody talking into a mic or on Facebook is ever going to have a prayer of having the information. And I try not to pass opinions on things about which I have nothing to pin my feet and hold it on. So any other question that anybody has, please feel free to give me a call, 772-340-1590. Be more than happy to talk to you. Let's have some opinions. What are some clever ways to discipline the child? And I understand that people like to say, spare the rod, spoil the child. Right? And so I'll bring up this piece out of Scripture, which is that in one place it says they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks, but there's also a section of Scripture that says just the opposite. It says there will come a time when people will have to take their plowshares and beat them into swords and their pruning hooks into spears. So a time for this, a time for that, a time for war, a time for peace, a time to build up, a time to tear down.
That sounds like that could be a great song.
Yeah, it could be. It could come right out of Ecclesiastes. And turn.
That's it.
To everything there is a season. I loved that song.
Oh, I did too.
It was a great song. There are so many great songs that we've had. So I'll ask the listenership, what are some of your favorite songs and why? Obviously, I'm looking for somebody to give me a call here, 772-340-1590. Okay, so you folks are not going to call. I was hoping today would be a lively day. I don't know why. So let me talk a little bit more about interfaith things, because that's something that we often have a question. The Four Chaplains is an example. In fact, it is considered to be the one of the big kickoffs to why there's a huge interfaith movement today. Right here, you had four chaplains from three different kinds of Christians, but Christians that didn't typically talk to each other, and you also had a Jewish rabbi who was there. And these are groups that have very different ways of practicing their religion. Same God, but different ways of practicing it. And so, they could come together. They could recognize that every sailor, every Marine, they didn't ask anybody, the rabbi didn't say, are you Jewish? Well, then you can have a life vest. The Catholic didn't say, are you Catholic? You can have a life vest. The Christian Reformed didn't say, are you a member of my church? You can have it. They just gave it to the next person, right? They just did what needed to be done in the moment. And there's enough survivors that can tell the stories. There's a famous story that actually gets mentioned in the ceremony of one of the sailors or Marines complaining that he didn't have gloves. And the rabbi actually took off his gloves and said, here, I've got a spare. You take these. And later on, the guy realized that the rabbi didn't have it. They were his.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So, it's things like that help people survive, because those were icy waters where the Dorchester went down. You can Google the Dorchester and see more of the story. They knew there was a danger of being torpedoed. There had been alerts, and they were watching, but it's war and things like that happen. It was a very important event for the war, and we're coming up on many years that we've been doing this. Port St. Lucie's been doing it. The city usually issues a proclamation. Mayor Orvik is one of the speakers scheduled to be one of the speakers at the ceremony. It will be at the community center on Rosso. Don't come to the synagogue, please. Come to the community center at Rosso. It's bigger than what we can hold in our facility. And there will be light refreshments at the end of it. But come and hear the story of the Dorchester.
What day is that going to be?
It's going to be February 2nd at 3 p.m. And if, there's parking all the way around the community center, so there's lots of parking there. We'll be in room A, which is, of their four big ballrooms, it's the one in the back with the stage. There's seating in there, and, and if you can't find parking there, you can either park at the shopping center just south of it or across the street at the police station in the city parking lot and walk across the street. Lots of parking in the area. We like that facility. That's why we use it for the Art Fest, which is in April. It got moved to April. And again, for our expo, which will be in the fall. Stand by for those, and more announcements of those after we get through the Four Chaplains.
Sure.
The Art Fest is, by the way, that's an art show and a craft fair and a direct sellers fest. So there's lots of things there. There'll be also a small group from the expo coming into it, and that will be April, whatever the first Sunday is in April. And that'll be at the community center as well. It's, again, a great facility. It's indoors, so we don't have to worry about wind or rain and or mosquitoes or any of those other things.
You know what really impressed me about this community was right after 9/11, and you talk about interfaith concepts, and to see how all the religions got together and participated together, whether it was Jewish or the imam or Catholic and Protestant, they were all there, together, and that was so impressive. And it happened again when somebody attacked the
mosque.
The mosque.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, we had the Interfaith Clergy Alliance of the Treasure Coast, of which I'm a member. We held an interfaith.
I remember that
service at the town hall, at what was then the town hall in Tradition, and so there have been many different things. There was the group came out to the mosque itself also and supported their rally, and I was so thrilled to see so many of my religion students that came. Yeah, there were a lot.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. I was surprised at how many students came up to me and said, "Hi, Professor Lobb. I was in your religion class, and I remember studying Islam, and I came here because they had to do a visit. They had to visit a synagogue, a church other than their own if they were Christian, and a mosque and a Hindu service. Ooh. So they had to do all of those different things, and to experience it, And I would have kids who would say to me, "Oh, can I do it by watching YouTube?" It's like, can you smell the pizza on YouTube? There's more to it. Right. Well, that's the point, right? The point is...
Yeah. I can see that question.
Yeah.
Though.
They think they can do everything by YouTube today.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, you cannot experience something. You can watch it on YouTube, but you cannot experience it. And that's different. It's a 2D experience on YouTube. Maybe someday when we get the holograms working, it'll be different and you'll be able to participate, but not today. We don't have that yet. Yes, I know there's 3D reality things with them.
I hate to ask, but do we have a Hindu?
We do have a Vedic Center. We have a couple of them in the area.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
They keep a pretty much a low profile.
Yeah, they do.
And and as Port St. Lucie continues to get bigger, because look at it, it's huge and it's growing faster than we can imagine. Of course, we're going to have more and more of different faith traditions, have more and more representation. And when you hit a critical mass, people want to have a place to gather to practice their way of approaching life and God and cosmology.
No, and that makes perfect sense, to say the least. Yeah. Yeah, we had a huge facility right opposite ESPN, as a matter of fact, in Connecticut. Yeah.
I mean, I wish we had more. Tucson has a lot more diversity because it's a lot bigger city. So I look at Port St. Lucie as kind of a little bit smaller, or St. Lucie, Martin, and Indian River counties, which is where IRSC has. And I had classes, and Okeechobee. Dare I forget Okeechobee, because I've taught at every campus except the main one.
That's
and
funny.
I've taught online too. So I've been up in Vero, I've been down in Stewart. Most of my time that I'm teaching is in
Well, I know they call this the main campus, just a couple blocks from here.
Yes.
But
yes, they do.
The Pruitt campus in Port St. Lucie is growing a lot faster.
It is. Port St. Lucie's growing.
Yeah, well, naturally.
Too, right. So the two cities are, Port St. Lucie's probably one of the fastest growing cities in the
Number
U.S.
6 in the country now.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah,
I mean, there isn't anywhere that I drive that I don't see construction housing going up, and whether it's apartments. Of course, I live not that far from Tradition, so there's huge growth there. There's huge growth out Becker, and as I tell people, it's not going to be long before we have 5 or 6 synagogues in Port St. Lucie, and probably a couple down in Martin as Martin continues to grow too, because I think Martin's growing not quite as fast as
No,
Port
it
St.
will
Lucie.
not grow as fast either.
Well, they're a little bit landlocked. They're going to have to grow, and they've got to deal with their ordinances so that they can grow west.
Well, there is a community that is talked about by Citrus, out by Citrus and the Martin Highway, that could be another tradition, but I think that's years away.
It could be, yeah. Lots of
Yeah.
folks do a lot of talking well ahead. Certainly tradition got stalled with the financial implosion and getting started again. And as I said, Becker's just got those two huge communities on either side out past the Publix, out toward the boat area.
And you know that that Becker Road area west, where the new senior areas are going to be constructed, Del Webb is one of them. You know that where that's going because Publix is starting to build out there, and it's like, okay.
Well, there's a whole shopping center that's supposed to come
You
in,
bet,
a major
yep.
shopping center
Yes.
that's supposed to come into that area. But you also, the Burger King now has a sign up. Wawa's came in, Culver's.
And you mentioned Greg Orebeck. I mean, Greg has made no secret about this to say that tradition is going to be the downtown of Port St. Lucie.
Eventually, yeah.
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 And I think he's right.
Yeah. Everything seems to be moving in that direction, moving further and further away from Highway 1.
You look at where we go with IRSA to Kendall, which was nothing forever. And, that's where Miami went.
Yeah.
You look at where we go in Broward, same thing, way out west. And the same with Palm Beach. With Wellington.
I just hope that we do a good job of preserving the things that make Florida Florida as we eat more and more of the swamp. Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago that there wasn't a Port St. Lucie, right? So I just hope that we do pay attention and don't imbalance everything.
We have to take care of the environment.
We have to take care of the environment. We need to take care of the bobcats and the deer and all those other critters that live in those areas.
Our neighbor's a bobcat in St. Lucie West. Seriously.
Okay.
It's now, I presume, a mama and two babies that we see around our neighborhood.
Okay.
And, they just kind of stroll along by the golf course. And
somewhere there's a dad.
And somewhere, I would
somewhere
think
there's a dad.
Somewhere there must be.
Yeah, when we lived in Tucson, we had a couple of bobcats that lived. The bobcats here are a little bit bigger. But that's not surprising. The rabbits are a little bit bigger. Things get a little bit mean and tough in the desert. So we've got bobcats. I've seen deer. There's tons and tons of bats that fly, and I'm concerned with if the trees all leave that area, where are those bats going to go? That might be something that somebody who knows about those things takes a look at. There's lots of environmental questions.
I mean,
birds.
You talk about all the migrating birds that fly around here.
Yeah.
Where are they going to go?
And so a creative solution that Tucson did that works quite well is something called Sweetwater. And I'll plant that out there for our city planners to think about. Sweetwater is a water treatment plant that's a man-made wetlands in Tucson. Yeah, it's out near the main water treatment plant. They've got this great big area, and ducks come through there, and it's a park. And what they do is that they take the gray water that comes, or actually it's the gray and the black, but it's treated and it's naturally treated and purified, and that helps the city get the better water, reuse water that comes back to it through the sewage system.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And,
that's cool.
And animals, fish and birds and geese and ducks and all those other things that look kind of like geese and ducks but aren't really. I forget all the names, but they're there, and there's great pagodas, and there's walk paths, and all kinds of things. It's called Sweetwater. Anybody can Google it, and we used to love to go there. It's one of the places in Tucson that willows grow. And willows are important once a year for a Jewish celebration.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah,
Okay.
we used to look for a couple of fallen branches from the willows.
I think that that area was built up long after Carol and I left in 74.
It could well be.
Yeah.
It could well be. But it's not hard to get to. It was not far from where we lived, so we used to like to go to it as a park. They had some great curly-tailed lizards.
Which we've got running around this building
around
right now.
here, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And they were there. We used to watch them come out. We'd try to go at the time when the lizards were out and watch them because they were all over the place there. But there were all kinds of different critters. And, of course, in Tucson, you watch out and make sure that no rattlesnakes are in your path and all those other little things. If any of those showed up at Sweetwater, they were invited to find other climbs if they could be captured. But
yeah.
So, yeah. But
how well we remember the snakes traveling up Sabino Canyon. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, and you learn to respect them, and if you respect them, there's usually not much interaction. So with that, do we have somebody on one of the lines there? Do I see a call coming in?
I think so.
Okay, so we have Sarah on line 1. Thank you, Sarah, for calling.
Okay, my question is, I receive other newspapers from other towns, and on the devotional page under the Jewish Center,
yes,
it has an ad, and it says, I would like an explanation for a crash course in Hebrew lessons, and it's offered for 5 Tuesdays, and my name is Sally, so I'll take it off air.
So you have a question about a crash course in Hebrew?
Yeah, what is the crash course that they're offering?
Okay.
It's offered for 5 Tuesdays.
And I'm assuming that's at a different synagogue from mine.
No, I get newspapers from other towns.
Oh, other towns. Okay.
Yeah, and it's the devotional section, the devotional page, and under the Jewish Center it says Crash Course in Hebrew Lessons offered for 5 Tuesdays.
Okay. So
could you explain
that?
Yes,
I would be
and I'll listen off air.
Okay, thank you, Sally. So, what is a crash course in Hebrew? Hebrew is, of course, the language of prayer in Jewish services. We pray in both English and in Hebrew, and most American Jews do not speak or understand or even read or decode Hebrew. So let me explain the difference in decoding. So, for example, when I look at the word Sarah, it's an S, which is a S, A, which is A, right? So Sarah is putting those sounds together, and whether I understand English or not, if I can decode English, if I can figure out the sounds, I should be able to come pretty close to reading the word. If I understand the rule for silent E or bossy E, then I know that L-I-N-E is a long I and it's line. Right? That's just knowing the rules of how to decode it. That's not reading. Reading is when you understand it. A crash course in Hebrew is usually designed for people who would like to follow the Hebrew in the Hebrew letters. Like, for example, in our prayer book that we use at Congregation Eitz Chaim, each prayer is written in Hebrew, and then underneath it is something called transliteration, which is English letters that approximate the Hebrew letters and their sounds, so that people who don't know the alphabet in Hebrew can decode it and sing along or follow the song. And then there's an English translation underneath it. So we have all 3 of those for every prayer. Not every prayer book does that. More modern prayer books do that more and more, because for the longest time, the theory was that if you didn't put in the transliteration, people would buckle down and learn the alphabet. That's not true.
But you would learn that before a bas mitzvah or a bar mitzvah.
Bat or bar mitzvah. Yeah.
Bat, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to move you into modern Israeli Hebrew.
Okay.
That's Sephardi Hebrew, which is the more commonly spoken Hebrew. Some congregations do still use the Ashkenazi. I like to call it Ashkefardic when it's mixed up, but never mind. Anyway, so the crash
just flew over the head.
So
there.
Back to Sally's question, the The crash course is designed to teach the alphabet, so it's to teach that Aleph is silent and Bet is B, and Vet is V, and Gimel is G, and Dalet is D. Right? It's closer actually to the Greek order Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet. Gee, I wonder why. Probably because the two alphabets were close in time in their development.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So English put a C in instead of the G, and we can discuss why. English is all funky in a lot of ways, but so the crash course is designed to teach how to sound out the letters and the vowels in Hebrew and how to actually how to decode it, not to read it because most people don't understand it. You have to be able to think in a language before you can actually read it, but you can decode it. You can sound it out and sound like you know what you're doing, and you can follow the songs.
All right, the ultimate dumb question.
Yeah.
Does Hanukkah begin with an H or a C?
Yeah, a chet. Begins with a chet. You know, somebody asked me that question once. I was one of the instructors in the Children of Abraham Journey Together conference, which was up at Lakeside, Ohio, in a Chautauqua society. And so we had this annual interfaith conference, and I was talking about midrash, which are the stories about the stories about things in Scripture and about other things like that. And somebody said to me, how do you spell midrash? And it was mem daled resh shin. Right? However you spell it in English works because it's a foreign word and it's not in the same alphabet as English. So there are multiple alphabets in the world. There's the English is written in a kind of a Roman alphabet, the Latin alphabet, and Spanish is in that same, and Italian, right? The Latin languages are in that. German used to use a slightly different script, now have gone mostly over to the Roman scripts, and Russian is Cyrillic. It's a different alphabet. Greek is a different alphabet. Arabic is a different alphabet. Hindi is a different alphabet. Farsi. So there's a number. Chinese are characters, and although they also do have a phonetic alphabet as well. Same with Japanese. They use characters and they use kanji. So there's lots of different alphabets in the world. Again, because of the way Americans are taught history, we tend to think that everybody speaks English. No, the majority of people in the world the largest number of people speak Chinese because China has the greatest population. And you've also got a huge number that speak Russian. So we're only one of the alphabets. And, of course, we're seeing more and more of Arabic now used throughout the U.S. So it's not just whether or not something's Spanish, but we're seeing a lot of different languages coming in as people are staying a little bit more to their heritage's languages. And we're seeing that reflected because people want to be able to sell. It was kind of interesting. I spent a few months in Israel at a time when the Russian immigration was big. And I used to go through the old city, which has a lot of old Arab markets. And, of course, a lot of their stuff would naturally be written in Arabic. And there were always signs out that said English spoken here, and then underneath that was another sign that said, in Hebrew spoken here, and then underneath that I started to see, Russian, по-русски, we speak Russian here, and it's usually trade that drives that because they want to be able to deal with people.
Commerce, you bet.
Commerce drives language, drives many things, and the Silk Road has been around as long as there's been dirt. People have been trading, Zhang Ho. People don't learn about Zhang Ho. Zhang Ho was a Chinese explorer who went for his emperor and did trade up and down Africa, brought back giraffes to China, and did a lot of creating some of those trade routes. Marco Polo was part of that trade route, brought noodles to Italy. And we can thank all the spaghetti and good stuff on Marco Polo and his family bringing that back.
Thank you, Chinese.
Yeah, thank you, Chinese, because they've had noodles since forever. And, of course, theirs is a rice-based carb system, whereas we're mostly a wheat and potato carb system. Potatoes kept the Americas well fed for a long, long time. We're also a corn-based starch. So we've got a lot of starches here that we can work with and from. And that's a long-winded answer to your question, Sally, but I hope that yeah. So the crash course is an intensive in the alphabet with practicing it and learning to decode it. Hebrew follows rules a lot more straightforwardly than English, but that's because English is a great blending of German and Norse and all different kinds of languages have come into English, front door and back door and every sideways that you can imagine. Look at some of the crazy rules about silent B, silent G, silent W. One time they weren't silent.
Now, is Hebrew read from right to left?
Yes, from right to left, so it goes the other direction. Theory is that most of the scribes that did the early writing were probably left-handed and didn't want to get their hands full of ink.
Whoa!
As they wrote.
Yes, for the lefties.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
That's great.
Because the language is more easily written by left-handers than by right-handers for the same reason that left-handers have trouble with English. Yeah. Folks can't see it in the studio, but we have people being clapped on the hands for using the wrong hand to write.
Getting back to
violence. Back to violence to teach kids things.
Nuns with the paddles.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
and thank you for people who do things left-handed and do things right-handed. We need both wings to fly.
Oh, I like that.
How about that one?
I
haven't found a bird that does much more than run around in circles if they only have one wing. So we need both of them to fly. We need them to move forward. That's really the bottom line. We need people on all sides of the spectrum of any issue to have rational discussions with each other and figure out where the real value lies, where the constructive thoughts and possibilities are. We all bring something different to the table. We all see different things. And if we look as a committee, then yes, we can actually come up with a better answer. So I'll leave it with that thought. This has been Ask a Rabbi. This is Rabbi Shafir Lobb for Congregation Eitz Chaim. Thank you for listening, and please consider sponsoring an episode of Ask a Rabbi. Thank you all.
And how do they get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of us on the website, www.eitzchaim.org, eitzchaim.org, or find us on Facebook. We do stream our services, so you can see them there as well. Friday nights at 7:30, or you can come to the synagogue Shabbat morning at 10:30 a.m., and that's 540 Northwest University Boulevard, Suite 102. It's next to the elevators. We're in the front of the building.
All right. See you next week.
Have a great week. See you next week for Ask a Rabbi.
You've been listening to Ask a Rabbi right here on WPSL, Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast, the webcaster to the world.
This is CBS News on the Hour, your home for